Welcome all to the U.S. Department of Energy's SBIR STTR Programs Office webinar. My name is Chris O'Gwyn. I'm with the DOE SBIR Programs Office, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Today's presenter is the DOE SBIR STTR Programs Director, Dr. Manny Oliver. Manny will provide you with a quick overview of the SBIR and STTR programs, and he will discuss the recent changes to our fiscal year 2013 Phase 1 Release 1 funding opportunity announcement. Now, since we have received quite a few questions from close to 500 registrants, we've grouped these questions and we've integrated many of the answers into today's presentation. If you have a specific question relating to either the topics or the technical content of your proposal, you'll have to now submit those questions to us via FedConnect. And you can look at page 2 of the funding opportunity announcement to find more details about how to go ahead and register with FedConnect. During the course of the webinar, you may submit your written questions to me via the text chat box on your screen, and Manny will address these as time permits. And if you would like to listen to the webinar again, I would invite you to go ahead and visit the DOE SBIR website on Monday, this coming Monday, and you'll find the link to the recorded webinar under our Funding Opportunities webpage. And now, let's begin. Dr. Oliver?
Hi, thanks, Chris, and welcome everybody. We have a pretty diverse group in the audience. I think we have some folks who are first-time applicants potentially to the DOE program, as well as some folks who've applied in the past who are just interested in the changes. So I'll hope that you'll bear with me as we try to satisfy everyone. So we will be covering some of the basic information about the program, and as well as some of the changes. So and we hope to cover this in about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and leave about the same amount of time for questions at the end. So let me begin with the basics in terms of the, I have just 4 slides here at the beginning, just in terms of the federal SBIR, STTR program. So on this first slide, we're showing the, again, the purpose of the program. And these programs do set aside money specifically for small businesses to do R&D. And the original charter is up there. And in the early days of the program, I think the type of R&D that was performed, varied quite a bit. But I would say over time, as the programs have been reauthorized, there has been increasing emphasis on commercialization. And we did get a few questions, submitted in advance, concerned about the emphasis on commercialization. Again, this is mandated by Congress. This is not really up to the agencies. The thing I would point out, we really still are funding, R&D, especially early stage R&D. And the important aspect of commercialization is that the R&D has to have commercial potential. So we can't fund basic science, through the SBIR and STTR programs. And similarly, on the other side, we don't actually fund, the deployment stage when you've already scaled the technology up and are ready, to put it into the market. We don't really get involved there. So it's really this early stage. I would guess I would compare our program really to investments in the private sector you would get from an angel investor or for a VC looking to do, seed stage funding. And I would also point out we accept greater, technical as well as market risk in the private proposals we would fund than that might be funded by the private sector. This is a federal-wide program, and actually the Small Business Administration is the administrator over all federal agencies. So they issue what are referred to as policy directives, which provide kind of the rules for operating the programs to all of the agencies. And they also report back to Congress in terms of the monies that have been spent and the outcomes associated with that. How each agency sets aside money is actually to set aside a certain percentage of their R&D budgets for each of these 2 programs. For SBIR, this coming fiscal year will be 2.7%. For STTR, it will be 0.35% of their R&D budgets. And as you can see, there are different agencies, depending on the size of their R&D budgets, that participate in these programs. There are 11 that participate in SBIR and only 5 for STTR. And the main difference between these programs is that STTR does require collaboration with a university or national lab as part of the application. On this slide, we're showing just to let you know the size of the budgets for both of these programs. Across the government, it's a pretty big program. About $2.5 billion are awarded every year, and this shows the breakdown for FY11. And DOE is kind of in the second tier. We're really only about 7 or 8% of the total budget. The two big players here are the Department of Defense and the National Institutes of Health. And then this is just basics about the program in terms of eligibility. Again, it is limited to small businesses. You're only competing against other small businesses for the funding. As a small business, you have to be a for-profit business and majority U.S. owned. And the Small Business Administration's definition of a small business is that you have 500 or fewer employees. The other restriction is that the principal investigator for the grant must be employed with the small business in the case of SBIR. And for STTR, the PI may come from either the small business or the research institution. And that's one of the functions of the STTR program. It does allow university or national lab personnel basically to spin out companies and take a leadership role. The main thing you should know in terms of funding is that there is no cost sharing required in either of these programs. And that is typically relatively rare in the federal government for working with the private sector. The Department of Energy typically for other grants or contracts that would go out will require about 20% cost share minimum from a business to receive funding, but this program is exempt from that requirement. And in terms of how the program is awarded, it typically goes through the 3 phases shown here. Feasibility phase across the agencies, that may be for anywhere from 6 to 12 months. In the Department of Energy, it's 9 months, with a budget typically on the order of $150,000, and that again will vary by agency. And the phase 2 is 2 years, and that's fairly standard across the agencies. And the budget guidelines there are for $1 million for those 2 years. Phase 3 refers to commercialization, which happens after phase 2, and that could be funded by the private sector or federal agencies. Agencies can't use that 2.7 or 0.35% funds to contribute to phase 3. They have to use other funds for that. Next, I'm going to just review the technology areas and the programs that participate in DOE with these that participate in the SBIR programs. I'll start with the mission statement for the Department of Energy. And we have 3 goals, and there are 3 relatively different areas that we do research. The first, and the one that we're probably most known for, is the work we do in clean energy. And even though that's a significant portion of the Department of Energy, it actually represents only about 30% of the funds that go out through the SBIR and STTR programs. The second goal, where our focus is on basic science, that actually represents about 65% of the funds that are awarded through the SBIR and STTR programs. And I'll talk a little more about the programs that work in that area. And finally, the Department does work in nuclear security. Most of those funds are off limits in terms of being used for the SBIR and STTR programs, but about 5% of the awards come from this nuclear security goal. This is an organization chart for the Department of Energy that you probably can't make out. And the important things I wanted to show here are there are really 3 basic groups in the department. The first here, again, these offices in green, these are 4 program offices that work on applied energy, the green energy side of the department. The ones in blue are the 6 program offices in the Office of Science, and the 2 here in red are under the National Nuclear Security Administration, and these are involved in nuclear security. And again, all 12 of these programs participate in the SBIR and STTR programs. Our office actually resides in the Office of Science and is responsible for administering the program, and we work with all of these programs. One of the other things I did want to point out is that there is a relatively new agency, the ARPA-E, within the Department of Energy. And they administer their own SBIR and STTR programs. It's smaller than the main program. So we have a budget this year about $175 million. Their budget is less than $10 million. But again, you would apply and learn about their topics completely separate from the rest of DOE. So here are the different functions. As I mentioned, our office administers the program. So we will issue the funding opportunity announcements. We will administer the review and selection process, and also conduct outreach, such as the webinar we're holding today. Many of you are actually going to be more interested in talking to the individual program offices, as they are the ones who develop the topics that are included in our solicitation. They also identify the reviewers, select the awardees, and then finally manage the projects that are awarded. And I also wanted to point out one other office that's involved, and that's our Chicago office. If you do receive an award, you will work with them. They're the ones who hold the money. You will work with them to finalize the negotiation of your grant and any other activities in terms of continuing your award or closing out your grant. So these are the three different groups and functions. I'm going to talk a little more about these different program offices and what they do. One of the things I always encourage people to do is to go to the websites for these individual program offices. Here I'm showing the program office website for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. And here you can find a lot of information about funding opportunities they have in their own programs. As I mentioned before, about 3% of the Department of Energy's R&D budget is set aside for SBIR and STTR, but the other 97% goes out through funding opportunities that are released by the program. So most of the money is awarded there. So you can find out about those funding opportunities. They often post technical reports in terms of understanding what the state of the art in the field and the types of opportunities they see that are ripe for funding. Many of them also put conference proceedings, some of the conferences they hold in terms of trying to understand what the state of the art, in their fields is. So again, we encourage you, and in the following few slides, as I discuss these programs, these links here will actually take you to the websites for those programs. So I'll start off with the clean energy offices. The first office here is the Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability. You can think of them as kind of the smart grid portion of the Department of Energy. With regard to SBIR, they typically fund topics related to power electronics, intelligent operation of the grid, and energy storage, but only energy storage as it relates to the grid. So this is often on a very large scale. The Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, I think this is probably one of our most popular, the topics they issue are the most popular. Energy efficiency, again, refers to having more efficient buildings. This includes lighting, HVAC systems, operating electric vehicles more efficiently. So those of you interested in EV batteries, they would be funded here out of this office. And renewable energy is concerned with generation, including wind, solar, geothermal, and other renewable sources. Also in the applied energy programs, the fossil energy, oil, gas, coal, there is a lot of work on trying to make those technologies cleaner and even focus on carbon sequestration, so taking the CO2 that's generated and making sure it doesn't end up in the atmosphere. Office of Nuclear Energy, looking at new reactor technologies. With SBIR, they typically have companies focus on new materials to use in reactors, as well as sensor systems that can withstand the high radiation environments in reactors. And again, these would be a broad area of the topics that would be covered by those programs. Now, in the Office of Science, again, there are 6 programs with a variety of and very different focuses. Those of you interested in more in the computing and software technologies, the Advanced Scientific and Computing Research Group, mostly focused on high-performance computing. Again, these are computers that are typically at our national labs, doing currently, I think, femto moving up to exascale computing. And they do both on the, work on the computing side, the software aspects of using high-performance computers, as well as doing high-performance networking. The basic energy sciences focus in two areas. One is fundamental materials, chemistry and physics for the applied energy sciences. So they will, involve in new battery materials, new materials for solid-state lighting. They're also developing instrumentation to help us analyze materials. So you'll see a lot of topics from them related to scientific instrumentation as well. The Office of Biological and Environmental Research. On the biological side, they work on the sort of genomic side of developing better microbes and plants for biomass and for bioenergy. On the environmental side, they do climate research, and so I have a lot of topics related to, sensors and data analysis as well for climate. Fusion energy, again, focused on a long-term goal of making fusion energy systems real. Again, I have a lot of topics related to developing technologies, including the reactors, sensors, and materials related to fusion energy. And then finally, we have the high energy physics and nuclear physics, really trying to understand fundamental nature of energy and matter. Again, they're focused on developing scientific tools such as accelerator technologies for that purpose, but also that have, medical and other applications. So on the next slide, you'll see some example topics. Again, I'm not going through these in detail, and you'll certainly find a lot more detail actually in our topics document for each of the solicitations that's issued. And finally, under nuclear security, the two offices here are the Office of Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation. Their mission is to make sure that nuclear materials, including weapons materials, aren't illegally transported, or people aren't, detecting, nuclear explosions or other events. And then the Office of Environmental Management is concerned with cleanup a lot of the nuclear sites in the country, so they're interested in a lot of cleanup and remediation technologies associated with those sites. And again, these are the type of topics that they would fund. So that's kind of a brief introduction on the overall scope of the programs, the type of technologies we fund. So I'll get a little more into the sort of nuts and bolts of how you apply and some of the changes that we've made in the application and selection process for the coming year. So this slide provides you kind of with a flow diagram and showing you the timeline in terms of applying and receiving awards from us. I'll start with the phase one shown at the top. And typically we will issue, the first thing we do is issue the topics. And so, for example, for our first release this year, we issued those in mid-July, and we just issued the funding opportunity announcement, or FOA, just this past Monday. And from an applicant, the first thing you need to do in terms of studying the topics and finding something you want to apply, the first due date you'll have is for the letter of intent. That's about 3 weeks after the FOA is issued. And then about 6 or 7 weeks after that, the application will be due. From that point, it takes us about 3 months to do the review and selection process. And then finally, you'll be notified whether you received an award or not. And then you'll again work with our Chicago office to finalize and negotiate your award. That typically is about 6 weeks after award notification. And then for phase one, that'll typically be about a 9-month budget period. And I'll go into more detail on all of these processes, in the slides that are coming up. This is just kind of a brief overview of the timeline. In phase two, once you start your phase one, and before it ends, in fact, we will issue the funding opportunity announcement for phase two. Only phase one awardees are eligible to submit to phase two. And again, we'll issue a funding opportunity announcement before your grant ends, and then you'll have an application due soon after your phase one grant ends. Again, a similar review and selection process and negotiation, and then you would start your 2-year phase two budget period. Again, that's an overview of the timeline. And in terms of how often we do that, we will have two, we refer to them as releases, Release 1 and Release 2, Phase 1 funding opportunity announcements this year. I went through the different offices that participate. So in the first release, which is already open, here are the 7 offices that are participating. These are 6 from the Office of Science and Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation. In the second release that will come out later this year, we have the 4 applied energy offices as well as the Office of Environmental Management. And on the next slide, we have the schedule, in case you're interested in the dates. In addition to the issue, the dates I pointed out before, I wanted to indicate that once we issue topics, we do hold a topic webinar. We did get a lot of questions about how do I find out if my topic fits, and more information about topics. So I won't cover really much of those questions today. Those are best handled in our topics webinar. And you'll have a chance to talk to the DOE program managers who are sponsoring that topic. So we did have a series of 3 webinars back in the end of July for that. And similarly for Release 2, we'll also have a series of webinars after those topics are issued. And again, as in today, after we issue a funding opportunity announcement, we'll also hold a webinar just to update you on changes associated with that particular funding opportunity announcement. Here's the Phase 2 schedule. And again, this is really only for those who have Phase 1s. Who were awarded Phase 1s last year will be applying for Phase 2 this year. So here are the dates this year. There are 2 important changes I want to point out. One is that in the past, if you were awarded an SBIR grant in Phase 1, you were required to apply for an SBIR grant in Phase 2. And similarly for STTR, with your authorization, you are actually allowed to switch programs on applying to Phase 2. So we'll let you know that is available when these Phase 2 FOAs come out this year. Also new is that your final reports for Phase 1 are actually required to be submitted with your Phase 2 application. In the past, you often completed those after or well after your Phase 1. Now requesting that those be completed before you submit to your Phase 2 application. All right, the topics. So I'll say a few things here. The agencies work very differently in how they do their topics. Some have very broad topics like NSF, where we're really looking for you to decide what are the breakthroughs needed in that field. Within DOE, since we are very focused on particular energy areas and we are funding a lot of R&D in those areas, our program managers are aware of what are the roadblocks and what are the breakthroughs that are needed to get through that. And so we primarily issue what we refer to as focused topics. So our topics will typically be maybe a page or 2 long in description, trying to give you some background on what we see the problems that are out there and the solutions that we seek. So that is a little different. Our topics document, for example, for Release 1 was, I think, over 150 pages. And so there's a lot of information there. Again, it's a PDF, and you can search it for keywords. If you're concerned about finding a topic that fit with the technology area that you work in. Once we issue the topics, again, this is the time when you can freely communicate with the DOE program managers. So they're in the topics document after we issue it. The email addresses for each of the program managers is in there. You feel free to email them. We also hold a webinar where you can submit questions in advance or ask them during the webinar. So this is really the best time of trying to find a fit between what you're working on or the area you're working in and the topics that we have. There are 2 major changes we have here for FY13 is these tech transfer opportunity topics. I'll have a slide on that in a minute. And then we've also changed our maximum award amounts. That was partly related to changes in the reauthorization of the programs. I'll talk about both of those. On the next slide, I'm showing you an example topic just to break it down. This, of course, is a very short one, so it fit on one slide. And here's the topic, global safeguards. We point out that every topic is numbered and every subtopic as well as lettered. And when you submit your letter of intent or application, it's very important that you designate, the topic and subtopic that you're submitting to. Because we have different award amounts depending on the topic, we've also posted the award amount right next to the name. So pay close attention to that when you're developing the budget if you're submitting to a particular, as you submit to a particular topic. Again, as I mentioned, there will be a program manager name, an email address associated with each topic. We also have this other subtopic, and the purpose of this is to look for, in a sense, your ideas that fall under, for example, this case, global safeguards, and the area that's described in the topic. So if you're working on something that's not, described in a specific subtopic, but still falls under the topic, then you could submit an application here. I have heard comments from companies thinking that, well, it's there, but we don't really put out much funding there. And actually, for the last 2 years, about 9% of the awards for Phase 1 have gone out through the other subtopics. So we do value it, your input and your perspective in trying to find, new solutions. And again, this is the type of topic that's new this year. It's a tech transfer opportunity. If you want to go to the topic webinars that are already on our website for Phase 1, we did describe this in much more detail. I just have one slide on it here. I want to just point out that it's clearly labeled because it is different. And we do have a couple pages explaining what the difference is. I'll just briefly summarize that a tech transfer opportunity for this year is usually a patent or patent application that is based on work that was done at a DOE national lab as a result of funding that came from the Department of Energy for research there. These patents are in the tech transfer office in these labs, and to help facilitate move them out, we are making SBIR and STTR awards under including them as topics. The two important things to note: if you have questions about the tech transfer opportunity itself, please contact the lab. The lab can answer those questions. The DOE program managers are not going to have that information. They are going to be the ones, again, who are going to be managing the review and selection process for making awards. I did get a question in advance, asking about, do you have to license the technology from the labs and then apply? And the answer there is no. What will happen when you do apply is that we will, in addition to your award, we will give you an option, not a license, but an option to a license at the lab. So while you're working on it, you can eventually migrate to get a full license. So more details about that, again, are contained in the topics document on the first 2 pages. Again, if you have any additional questions that come after that, please don't hesitate to ask us about that. The maximum award amounts. In the past, we just had one maximum award amount that applied to all topics. Starting this year, we will actually have potentially multiple award amounts. For example, in Release 1, we have 3 different award amounts, and these will, again, vary by topic. Again, the majority are following what are called the guideline amounts in the policy directives. We do have one topic at this level and another at this higher level this year. And because there are different budget amounts, please pay close attention to ensure you're using the right budget for the topic. Again, if you submit a budget that's too large, you will be administratively declined. Your application will be administratively declined. Okay, the next phase, after we issue the topics, would be issue the funding opportunity announcement. And again, this basically contains the rules of the competition, if you will. So we discussed the amount of funding available, the number of awards, the eligibility criteria, who can apply, and then what we're looking for in the application or the letter of intent, the review criteria, and so on. So again, it's unfortunately a little bit dry, but if you want to know the details, pretty much most of your questions would be answered here. The rules for communicating with DOE program managers change when we issue the funding opportunity announcement. So instead of contacting them directly by email or phone, you need to submit questions through FedConnect. And details about how to do that are contained in the funding opportunity announcement. And again, usually with each FOA, we'll be hosting a webinar like the one today to kind of answer any questions and discuss changes. Again, as I mentioned, the letter of intent is typically due about 3 weeks after the funding opportunity. So this is for Release 1 is due the day after Labor Day. And again, the reason we have this, we did get some questions about, why do we have letters of intent? Why are they required? And part of this is really for us to start the review process. Once we have your letter of intent, and the key part of the letter of intent that we're looking for is this abstract. And please write this so that it contains enough information so that we can assign reviewers. Some people sometimes just give a very brief description saying, I'm working on some new sensor technology, for example. We actually need to know, what it is, how you're planning to do the sensing. If it's an optical method versus electrochemical method, that would actually change the reviewers we would assign. So think about this abstract not in terms of trying to sell your idea to a program manager, but to make it easy for the program manager to identify the best reviewer for your application when it comes in. We will also, the program manager in reviewing your abstract, will also provide feedback if he or she feels that it's outside the scope of the topic. I think some of you, especially coming in maybe later and not have enough time to communicate with the program manager, go ahead and submit a letter of intent, and they will provide feedback if it looks like it's outside the scope. And I would point out for this year that the letter of intent is required. If you don't submit a letter of intent, your application, you won't be eligible to submit an application. So do put this in. And we do have limits. Similar to last year, we limited 10 applications. And that, of course, means 10 letters of intent for every solicitation. The other major change with letter of intent submission, last year we just had you email it directly to our office. This year we're going to have you submit it online directly to our DOE system where we manage applications. So this is a fairly important change. More detail is contained on this and how you would register to set up an account and submit your letter of intent. Since that's only a few weeks away, we encourage you to go in and register and just get familiar with the system. Potentially the reason we're having you do this is, in the future, although not right away for this first funding opportunity announcement we have right now, you will also you'll be able to see the status of your applications when the decisions are made. You'll be able to look at the reviewer comments directly online without having to request them for us. So even though initially this may seem an extra step, this will really get you have more access to understanding the status and the reviewer comments associated with your application. I'm going to talk about the application. I'll talk about first the process, and then I'll talk about the different types of application, SBIR versus STTR, and this new fast track application that we're implementing this year. So the process, we are a granting agency, and therefore we use grants.gov to submit your applications, similar to NIH or USDA. And again, the thing that we would want to point out is that before you can submit your application, you do have to take these 3 steps of obtaining a DUNS number, registering with the System for Award Management, and then also doing a grants.gov registration. I know many of you who are new to the government, this looks like a lot of bureaucracy. These are required, unfortunately, to issue money to you. For example, this System for Award Management registration, anytime we issue an award, we pull data right out of there and know that it's up to date because you have to update it annually. And so this is a resource used out throughout the government for anybody wishing to receive money, so that is a hard requirement. We would encourage you to start this as soon as possible. Somebody asked, do I need to register in grants.gov to submit a letter of intent? The answer is no. Those will come directly to us, but you do need to start this process before you submit your grant application. To complete an application, there are 2 things you need. You need the application package, and you can get that directly from grants.gov. This is a large, if you want to think of it, PDF, where you upload additional PDFs in there. So, for example, your project proposal, you would draft and convert it to a PDF file, and then just upload that directly into this form. And in terms of help in filling out this form, Information is contained both in the topics document, our funding opportunity announcement, and there is a separate document which is instructions for filling out this form. These are all on our website, and there are links provided right here if you need assistance in doing that. And again, you're free to call us or email us with any questions that you have in the process. So here are the important parts of the application that you'll submit. Probably the most important, again, is the project narrative, where you're describing your phase one or your fast track proposal. And again, one of the new things we're changing this year is we're actually putting page and word limits. We've had cases where some even phase one applications have gotten extremely long, extending beyond 40 pages, and so some of this has gotten quite excessive. So here are the page limits and word limits we're implementing this year. Again, 15 pages for phase one, 20 for phase two, and 25 pages for fast track. Again, the budget, key personnel, commercialization plans. Please be reminded that DOE does require both a phase one and phase two. The phase one is very brief. People have asked about getting a template or example. We do have an example here on our website. Again, this typically doesn't need to be more than about 2 pages. Again, our emphasis is on trying to understand whether you're looking at the market, you understand the market you'll eventually address. Again, we understand you're doing R&D at this point, but we want to know that you're looking forward and anticipating a market opportunity for this. So please summarize that and provide it with your phase one. The phase two is much more detailed. Again, looking for concrete evidence that you are aiming your efforts toward commercialization. We have a lot of comments in this area, with this emphasis on commercialization. The other thing I want to point out is, historically, about a third of our awardees after phase two discontinue work when they discover that the market for their technology was actually not sufficiently big. So that's a number we think is way too high, and that's a discovery we feel that you're making way too late. So that part of the reason of having these commercialization plans here are to ensure that you are thinking about this not after you develop the technology, but actually in advance and while you're developing the technology. So we started summarizing the top 5 reasons that people's applications don't go through. And the first 3 are fairly serious errors because your application won't actually get reviewed. Probably the most common one is this registration. Although most people register in advance, people may come back in the second, third, or future year and just forget to update their registration. That registration process takes typically on the order of 5 days, although they can do it faster. But if you're submitting your application 2 days before the deadline and forgot to update this registration, the CCR, now SAM registration, you won't actually be able to submit an application to grants.gov. So we do have a lot of panic phone calls occurring in the last few days, so we just want to remind you to do that. We did implement a new phase 1 commercialization plan last year. Because of the new requirement, people aren't reading through the requirements in the FOA and are leaving that out. Please remember to submit that. And again, people do fail. They draw up a nice detailed application, but don't tell us which topic and subtopic they're applying to. So we will not assume that you're applying to one and then have you later tell us, no, that's not where I was applying. So you need to specify that both in the title, in your proposal, as well on the first page of your project narrative. 2 other important problems that we see are calculating what we refer to as the level of effort. I'll talk about that on the next slide. For both STTR and SBIR, a certain percentage of the work has to be done, at the company. And calculating that involves breaking your budget up into the right categories and determining what percent belongs to the company. We encourage you to use this level of effort worksheet we provide that automatically that will take the categories from your budget page and just plug them in, and you'll have the number directly. So when you fail to do that, sometimes you'll be ineligible to either for SBIR or STTR as a result of not calculating this level of effort correctly. And then another common one is failing to mark proprietary data. You do need to mark all the proprietary data in your application. and we have specific instructions on how to do that. So really just cut and paste, the wording that you need to put in, at the bottom of your project narrative to describe the proprietary information. Okay, so again, we have two types of, there are two separate programs, SBIR and STTR, and they do have some separate requirements that you should be aware of. With DOE, we actually use the same topics for SBIR and STTR, so that does allow you to use one application to submit to both. But you have to meet, if you do that, you have to meet the requirements for both. So again, with SBIR, the small business for Phase 1 has to do 2/3 of the work. In Phase 2, they have to do at least half. For STTR, it's a little different. The small business needs to do 40% for both Phase 1 and 2, and the research institution needs to do 30%. And some important other differences between these. If you're doing an STTR, between you and the research institution, you do need to negotiate an agreement discussing the intellectual property rights. That can be very time-consuming. We actually supply a model agreement on our website to help you out with that, and most of the national labs are familiar with that agreement if you work with a DOE national lab. One other important change that was made for 2013, in the past you could not work with a DOE national lab or any national lab with an SBIR unless you got a waiver. Now that, with reauthorization, that restriction has been removed. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the fast-track applications. This is fairly new for us this year, and other agencies have done this. I just wanted to, again, summarize what it is. So it's actually submitting a combined Phase 1, Phase 2 application. So that means your budget period will cover the 9 months for Phase 1 as well as the 24 months for Phase 2. Your project narrative will cover the entire Phase 1, Phase 2 period. And because this is both Phase 1 and Phase 2, you do need to submit a full Phase 2 commercialization plan. You do not have to submit a Phase 1, which is really a brief version of the Phase 2. The reason to have a fast-track application is that with the current process where you get a Phase 1 award, and at the end you apply for Phase 2, this gap in here where you apply and wait for your award, there's usually about a 5-month gap until you start your Phase 2 award. The main purpose and the primary benefit is for allow you to really move continuously through the process. And now note that you will still have progress reports that are due, and you will move between these phases based on submitting those progress reports. You must have a very strong application here that's strong both for Phase 1 and Phase 2. For many of the Phase 1 proposals we get where there's fairly risky Phase 1 research with many different outcomes or many different Phase 2 types of Phase 2 proposals that would be submitted, this is probably not a good approach. And because of the emphasis on having a strong commercialization plan with your Phase 2 proposal, if you don't have strong commercialization experience in the market you're looking at, that's probably also another reason not to submit the fast track. Again, I mentioned you will have progress reports that will be due, and again, if adequate progress is not made, you will not, again, move further and receive additional funding along the way. So we still have checkpoints through the process, even though the full amount, has been set aside for the award. And another key point is you will not be allowed to submit an application both to a regular Phase 1 and a fast track. You must decide which one you would like to pursue and pick one or the other. I think people have asked questions about, well, how many fast track awards can be made? It seems that many people would want to do that as opposed to doing a regular Phase 1. This is the initial year, so we can't really tell based on past history how many applications we'll get in for both of those paths. So I can't give you an accurate estimate. It will depend on both the number and the quality of those applications. I can tell you that for an agency like NIH, typically only about 10% of the awards go out through fast track, and a similar number of applications also come in, about 10%. So I think in our first year we would probably anticipate probably no more than 10% of the awards going out. Again, this will be a first year. We'll have to see, again, the number and quality of applications. And again, will all the topics accept fast track? I think the majority will. There may be special cases for specific topics where we may not accept fast track. And in fact, there may be some topics. We do have one in the first release that is only accepting fast track applications. So that's, again, something to look at in the topics document. We just amended the topics document in the middle of this week. The one topic, in case you are already thinking about applications, topic 21 was amended, and they will only be accepting fast track applications. Again, the review and selection process. We do send things out for external peer review, typically at least 3 reviewers, and 1 reviewer for a Phase 2 commercialization plan. Here are the review criteria. There are more details about these criteria in the funding opportunity announcement. And again, we will notify you within 90 days of the decision. If you're wondering who is actually reviewing your proposal, here are the breakdown of the reviewers that we use for Phase 1 and DOE. Again, some for national labs, primarily DOE national labs, but also other agencies, university reviewers, private sector reviewers, as well as government employees. These are government labs that use government employees. Most of the DOE labs are using contractor employees. Many of you also had questions about what are your chances for success. And so here are numbers from last year. Typically 15% of the applications for Phase 1 are awarded. We also want to point out there were another 15% that were recommended for funding but not awarded. Again, we are limited in the amount of funds we have in the program, so we do get a lot of high-quality applications. So unfortunately, not all of those high-quality applications do get funded. About 55% were not recommended for funding, and another 15% were declined without review. And these were primarily for administrative reasons, leaving things out, or having their application didn't fit within the topic. For Phase 2, statistics are very different. Again, only Phase 1 applicants can apply, and actually here about half of the applicants are awarded. Here there was about another 14% who were recommended for funding but not awarded, and about a third that were not recommended for funding. We get questions about, especially if you've never applied before, what are your chances? I would indicate last year 19% of the awards that went out for people who are the first time they've ever applied to the DOE, SBIR, STTR programs. And again, a total of about 30% are first-time winners that have not received prior awards. Award negotiation, as I mentioned, when you're notified of selection, your grant will start about 6 weeks after, and you have those 6 weeks to work with our DOE Chicago office to negotiate your grant. We do ask you to, when they ask for information, that you respond to them quickly so that we actually can execute your grant before your start date. We did get questions about intellectual property and reporting requirements. The one thing I want to point out about intellectual property is that with any award where the government has funded the R&D, the government does reserves the right for a government use license for that intellectual property. You are free for all the commercial applications. The government is not trying to own the IP. It's up to you to file and maintain ownership of the IP, but the government, if it ever wishes to, buy or have made that product, will, still has rights. So this is really just trying to protect the government. If you develop a new technology, decide the commercial market is really important, the government says, hey, we need a small amount of these for, some, Department of Energy or military requirement, and you say, hey, that market's too small, I'm not interested, this really reserves the government the right to go out and ask for another party to manufacture that, for government use. The government is not going to, compete with you or license it to a third party to compete with you in the commercial or private markets. So just understand the basis of that intellectual property restriction. But we don't place any restrictions. All the IP that you had before you started with this project, that's still all your IP. All the IP you generate during the project as a result of the funding is still essentially your IP, except for the government clause to use that IP. And I did want to say we did revamp our commercialization assistance program. This happened at the end of last year. So 2 important things. One, we will provide assistance to you, both Phase 1 and Phase 2 assistance through our provider, Dawnbreaker. However, with reauthorization, you are not required to use the Dawnbreaker. If you have a company identified to assist you with commercialization, you can use them. All we ask is that you submit them as a vendor. This vendor is a subcontractor consultant in your Phase 1 or Phase 2 application. We won't, amend your award later once you found it. So please include them with your application. And so I think that ends really the bulk of my presentation, on the process. I know I've gone a little long here. I do have kind of a required presentation we have with regard to fraud, waste, and abuse. One of the other aspects of reauthorization is that Congress specifically has asked the agencies to spend more time, more effort, and on looking for fraud, waste, and abuse in the SBIR programs. I just have a few slides on this. I want to make you aware of it. Again, there are people who are doing things that are malicious and intentionally so. It's a very small fraction of the population. But occasionally you might run into doing some things somewhat inadvertently, and we just want to make you aware of those as well. So it's fairly important. So in terms of the type of fraud that has been seen, again, people submitting a plagiarized proposal where maybe the work's been done already. We have seen things where people are copying articles from papers and plagiarizing that material and submitting in their application. Any false information about the company, not being an eligible company to work in, it's not majority owned or anything like that, following the eligibility requirements. And even, doing funding, seeking funding for work that's already been done. Maybe they've already received another grant at another agency and have submitted a duplicate, to seek more funding. During award, once you've received the funds, you do need to use them for the purpose that was intended as stated in your budget. We do allow you to modify those, but you should notify the grants or contracts office that you work with. People might be actually submitting plagiarized material as a progress report or a final report that does not reflect the work that was done. And then finally, claiming results, again, maybe using results from another award as a basis for reporting results from award you got from DOE. Again, there are several rules here that you should be aware of. And again, some of these I've covered in the past in terms of making sure you're an eligible small business and that you perform the work. I think we did get a couple questions. For example, if I'm a startup company and I do my work at a research university, can I count that as my effort? And the answer there is no. If you are a small business, you must perform your portion of the work at your business. If you're working with a university or a subcontractor, that will be count toward the subcontractor portion of the work and not toward the business portion. I do want to mention that duplicate or overlapping proposals. So I want to make it clear that if you have an idea, it's okay to submit that idea to 3 or 4 agencies because you don't know whether you'll get funded from any of those agencies. The 2 things you need to keep in mind are, 1, you need to notify each agency that you have submitted, essentially a proposal for essentially equivalent work to other agencies. So in our application, there's a space to indicate that. So make sure you do clearly indicate that this is you are submitting duplicate proposals at other agencies. And finally, if you are fortunate enough to get multiple awards, more than one award, for essentially the same proposal, there might be slight differences, but the bulk of the work is similar. And you might at first think, well, that's great. I'm going to work for both agencies, and with the additional money, I'll actually do more work and actually be able to contribute more than I initially projected, to both agencies. In fact, the government will look at that differently, and it will consider that fraud, that you're actually taking 2 awards to do the same work, and you can be prosecuted for that. So this whole duplicative funding is a big area of investigation. So just be very careful. Just be very honest and open in your dealings. Most of the companies we work with, fall into that category. However, there are some that have not, and so I would just encourage you to just be very honest and open if you are, submitting multiple proposals. A final one is that all R&D on these proposals must be, completed in the U.S. We do give, waivers in certain exceptional cases, but we have, seen evidence of fraud where some people are either intentionally, unintentionally having work done outside the U.S. Again, our Inspector General will actually investigate any wrongdoing, and those found to do something wrong will be prosecuted by the Department of Justice. There will be, you could be sent to prison as well as receive fines and payment for restitution. I just want to point out this is quite real. Here's an University of Florida professor who was actually sentenced December of last year. These were related to SBIR grants. And again, this was a case of doing fraudulent work. He did set up a company to do the work, but actually did not do any work and submitted reports based on research from others in terms of progress and final technical reports. So this is a serious matter, and you should be aware the government is taking it very seriously. If you know of any wrongdoing, we encourage you to report that. So there's some contact information that relates to the Office of Inspector General here at the Department of Energy. All right, there are a few slides. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to stop here. Well, here, I'll go one more slide. Here's our contact information. Again, if you ever have any questions, contact us. Look at us on the web. If you're not on our mailing list, please join the mailing list. There's a link at the bottom of the first web page. You can always email and phone us with questions. So I'm going to stop there and just open up for questions. If you want to flip through these slides later, they have information about both our website and the SBIR.gov website. So I'll stop there, and I think how we're going to handle this, Chris is going to be going through the questions you submitted through the chat box. I think he'll read them out loud so that everyone's aware.
Yeah, Manny, we had quite a few questions, and we've been answering some of these throughout the webinar. But yes, we do have some questions here. I want to encourage everybody to go to our website shortly after this on Monday morning. Sometime you'll find this recorded webinar, and also you'll find, as Manny has mentioned throughout the presentation here, that our topics are available. The funding opportunity announcement is available there, and the grant application package. All of this can be found on our website. Instructions on how to complete a Phase 1 SBIR STTR application. So let me start with this question, Manny, and you can briefly answer these as I read these. Here it is. If our company subcontracts out some of the research to another small company, does this company count as the grantee as well, since they are our subs?
In terms of, if you're asking about meeting the level of effort requirement, the company, the small business that submits the application must meet that requirement. So, for example, for an SBIR, where you have to do 67% of the work in a Phase 1, that allows you to subcontract out 33%. Now, again, you can subcontract that out to whoever you want. That doesn't necessarily have to be a small business. That can be a large business, a university, or whoever. But that 67%, in terms of making sure that your level of effort is met, that 67% still has to be done at your small business. You can't combine other small businesses to meet that requirement.
So how might the federal-wide budget sequestration, this is the automatic across-the-board federal budget cuts in January 2013, affect this funding solicitation? Or
Yeah, so in terms of the award amounts, we don't really have a budget for FY13 yet. Again, we go ahead and issue topics and funding opportunity announcements, projecting, levels that are approximately similar to last year. Any changes, again, especially if, depending on the outcome of the election, those budgets can change, and that would affect our budget. Again, as I mentioned before, both the SBIR and STTR are just a percentage of our R&D budget. So as the total DOE R&D budget goes up and down, it will move accordingly. Specifically with regard to sequestration, the numbers that are bounced around are on the order of 7 or 8% cut across all agencies. So that would be the magnitude of the cut we would also see here at DOE if that was implemented.
Great. Manny, maybe briefly, can you discuss what are the ratios of awards to applications for STTR versus SBIR?
The awards to applications, again, I didn't generate that slide this year, and partly because they generally track pretty closely. So the award rates are within 5% of each other. As I mentioned, for last year it was 15% overall. So the SBIR and STTR aren't going to be much different from each other. And historically that's been the case. So if you're wondering, are my chances better submitting to one or the other, there's not a significant difference. As I mentioned before, you can actually submit to both. So a large fraction of the people who are thinking about STTRs, if they can fit it in their budget, will actually submit to both SBIR and STTR, and that gives DOE program managers, when they're trying to recommend for award, the flexibility depending on the budgets in each of those cases.
What is your current policy on resubmission of previously submitted Phase 1 or Phase 2 proposals?
Yeah, so for Phase 1s, and I'm sorry I didn't get to one of those questions. One of those questions was submitted earlier. For Phase 1, you're certainly free to resubmit. You do need to make sure that you're resubmitting, that topic shows up, again the next year. So again, because we have these focus topics and some of them don't carry from year to year, you do have to wait until that topic comes up again. For Phase 2, we have a process where only prior year Phase 1 awardees can apply to Phase 2. And so if you're rejected at that point, that really is your only opportunity to apply for a Phase 2, because other Phase 2 solicitations in future years, again, are pulling from the previous year. But we don't want to open that up, because then we would get everybody who was rejected from the past 2 or 3 years applying. So the intent is really to fund approximately half of the Phase 1s that were awarded in the previous year, and we're trying to stick to that.
All right. If I have a project to submit or an application, but my company is new, less than 1 year old, is my company eligible to submit a proposal?
Yeah, again, the newness of your company does not affect your eligibility. I guess in the past, we have received applications from people who actually haven't yet started their company. What we ask you to certify in terms of eligibility currently is that you will be eligible at the time of award. And as you can see from our timeline, there's plenty of time from the time you submit your application to the time you actually receive your grant. So for this year, it will be approximately 4 months, a little over 4 months. So as long as you are an eligible company when you receive your award, that'll be fine. I would point out that SBA has proposed revising those eligibility regulations so that companies would have to be eligible at the time they apply. So they've gotten some feedback on that, and I believe by the end of this year, they may change those eligibility rules. That won't be known until probably December, so I can't comment on what that outcome will be. But if the outcome is that you must be eligible at a time of application, that would change what I just described.
Will there be a third Phase 1 release this year?
Oh, I didn't mention that. Thanks for bringing that up. Last year we piloted a third release, and the purpose of that was, partly to look at using much broader topics in conjunction with a pre-application. Based on, our experience with the process and actually feedback from some of the applicants who participated in that, we have decided not to do a third release this year. So all the funding will go out between those, for Phase 1, will go out between those 2 releases this year.
Do you plan to carry over any topics recommended for funding between Release 1 and Release 2?
Generally because the topics come from specific programs, so all the topics in Release 1 are from the 7 programs I had on that earlier slide. We don't anticipate any of those topics carrying over directly into Release 2. I mean, there are some similarities for some topics that from the different programs. So, for example, there's one in Release 1 that relates to wide-gap semiconductors that could apply to lighting, and there may be a lighting topic also in Release 2. So there is a possibility, but again, that would probably be the exception more than the rule.
Do I need a CCR/SAM registration in order to submit a letter of intent?
The answer to that is no. Again, the CCR and SAM registration is required to submit your application.
What is the basis for deciding which proposals to actually fund of those recommended for funding?
And again, some of that is described more in our funding opportunity announcement. Again, when you're recommended for funding, again, the program managers will look at the review criteria that were mentioned. What's the quality of the work that you're proposing to do, the quality of the team that's doing it, as well as the impact. So even though they all make it into a category where they're high enough to be funded, they will look at the details of that. They will also, among the different topics, so a program may have several topics, and try not always to put them all in one topic, to spread them out. It will depend on the quality. If they get a few outstanding in one topic, they may make an exception and say, hey, these are really 3 great different ideas in this one topic. So I can't give you, a general rule. It will depend on, the nature of the applications, the nature of the mission of that program office, and how those recommended for funding, match up to the mission of that office.
Is the science and commercialization aspects given equal weight for award consideration?
Well, the science, there are different review criteria. So in a sense, you might think of the science is kind of embedded in the first 2 review criteria, which is, what is the sort of quality of the idea? What is the advance you're proposing? Is this a significant advance over the state of the art? So that's really the sort of the technical part. Science also shows up in the quality of the team. So what is the quality of the scientists or engineers who are working on the project? The commercialization part really shows up in the 3rd criteria, which is the impact. What is the if the technology is successful, what is going to be the impact of the work in terms of the taking this technology to market. Those 3 different criteria, the quality of the essentially the idea, the team, and the impact are all weighted equally. So a third, a third, a third.
We have heard that large businesses and VCs are now finding a way to obtain SBIR funding. Is this true with DOE? One of the things I didn't address today, I'll go into a little more detail about the whole VC. I mentioned before that the size and eligibility rules are being revised by the Small Business Administration, and those would be out in December. So those are the rules that determine not only how big the company has to be, eligibility at time of award, but those also refer to the as part of reauthorization, the fact that companies that are majority owned by multiple venture capital, private equity, or hedge fund could now participate in the program. So currently those rules have not been revised by SBA. So currently neither DOE nor any other agency can accept applications from those companies. Now, however, once SBA does revise the rules, and they put out some preliminary revisions to those rules earlier this year, they received comments from small businesses. I think they are responding to those comments and will be drafting revised rules based on those comments. So I can't really comment on what will come out of the eligibility regulations after that. After that point, those eligibility rules go into effect. The one thing I would say is that there are two hurdles or 2 steps that must be taken for companies to apply. For example, a company that's majority owned by multiple VC, hedge fund and private equity companies to apply to the program. One is SBA must revise those rules. There's a second step that's described in reauthorization that many people don't see, is that each agency must actually submit to Congress and the Small Business Administration a justification for opening its program up to such companies. So once we know what the revised eligibility rules are, it's anticipated we will take a hard look at that before going forward
to decide how we will change eligibility for our solicitations. Now, for example, for phase 1 of this year, both of our solicitations will be issued. We have one this month in August. We'll have a second one in November. We'll actually go out before the new rules are issued in December. Therefore, both of our phase 1 solicitations this year will go out under the current rules. So there is no participation by those companies for our FY13 phase 1. Sorry, this will have a long answer, but just wanted to make sure everybody was clear about that.
Can a university professor apply for an STTR award without involving a company?
So the answer for that is no. These are both small business programs, and the only eligible applicants are small businesses. So we only accept applications. Even in the case of an STTR where the PI might come from the university, the application must still come from the business. And again, the business must still do 40% of the work, and that means work not at the university.
And
so yes, STTR is intended to allow spin-outs from universities and national labs, but the spin-out does require the creation of a company.
Okay. Can a PI be changed after application is selected for funding? Principal investigator be changed?
Principal investigator changes are fairly rare. That's considered fairly serious. If we've reviewed your proposal with that PI, it would completely be up to the DOE program manager whether they would accept such a change. It is not automatic. It must be approved.
Is there a project narrative limit? Is there a hard page limit or strictly a word limit?
And again, that was on one of the earlier slides that I had, and so there is those numbers will be in the funding opportunity announcement. I'll try to pull it up here on the slide just so I think I did go through that one pretty quickly. So right here, so there's both a page limit and a word limit. We don't want you shrinking the fonts down too small, so you have to meet both of those.
So how will I know if a topic allows for a fast-track application or not?
You can assume that all topics allow for fast-track unless it specifically states that no fast-track applications are allowed. If you're referring to Release 1 that has just come out, their fast-track applications are allowed for all of the topics as it's currently put out in Release 1. As I mentioned, there's only one topic, Topic 21, that has a restriction, and that one actually, the restriction is it will only accept fast-track applications and no regular Phase 1 applications.
Okay, we're getting down to the little questions here. Is there a minimum margin size on your project narrative, the requirements there?
Chris, you still there?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes, I'm still here, Manny. Is there a minimum margin size requirement?
I'm not really sure what they mean by. Maybe if that person could resubmit what they meant by.
I'm thinking what they mean here in terms of page limits.
Font
so
we're not going to get involved in margins and things like that. Just go by a word count and a page limit.
Okay. And we have another question here. Can we change subcontractor after the LOI has been submitted?
That is something that we would allow. Again, the purpose of letter of intent is to look at reviewers. We need to know who your subcontractors are because potentially if a subcontractor is a national lab or university, we wouldn't go there for a reviewer. So that's the reason we ask for those in the letter of intent. As soon as you have changed that, we would ask you to notify us of that.
Okay. How and whom do I ask a question on whether a solicitation topic is a good fit for our technology?
So sort of in general, you would ask the DOE program manager. I think I had indicated early on, unfortunately. trying to find the slide. So here on this slide, sure I get the right one. Sorry. So on this slide, here's the topic from our topic document. You would try to find, the topic that's the best fit, and then here you would submit it to the program manager. Now this version of the topic document is the one that we put out before the funding opportunity goes out. If you look at our current topic document that went out with the funding opportunity announcement, these names are no longer there. And that has to do with the fact that while the funding opportunity announcement is out, contact with these program managers has to go through FedConnect. So follow the instructions on inside the funding opportunity announcement for registering in FedConnect. You would submit your question, and we will forward it to the DOE program manager, and the response will be posted on FedConnect for you to see.
Okay. What is the allowable CRADA percentage for Phase 2s?
I assume by CRADA percentage you're talking about a agreement you have with a national lab to subcontract some of the work with them.
That's correct.
And for that will depend on whether you have an SBIR or STTR. So for an SBIR, the small business in a Phase 2 must do 50% of the work. So again, the maximum that could be subcontracted to a national lab would be the remaining 50%. For an STTR, the business must do at least 40% of the work in Phase 2. And the research institution must do a minimum of 30%. And so their maximum would be approximately 60%, if only the small business and the research institution were involved.
And do letters of support and references count in the word and page limits? I'm assuming of the project narrative is what they're referring to.
Yeah, anything inserted in the project narrative document will be considered. Now, I want to point out that some people often put a lot of information there. They sometimes duplicate the submissions. They'll put personnel separately, and then they'll put that again with the project narrative. So all the other documents that you can submit separately, please submit those separately. We have lots of proposals where they end up getting duplicated because you submit it with the project narrative and in a second place. So you don't need to duplicate that.
Okay, and we're getting a few questions here. Where should letters of support be attached to the application? That's more of a nuts and bolts type of question.
Yeah, some of those nuts and bolts, if you just want to submit those when you're ready to submit to, again, our website or call our office, those are fine. I did get, some of the other questions I didn't answer actually that were submitted. I think we did get a question about the sequential Phase 2s. One of the things that was in reauthorization was the ability for an agency to award a second Phase 2 to a company that had received one. And the question was, is DOE planning to implement this? So yes, we are planning to implement that, but we will probably not implement it until FY14. So the applications, for those of you who have Phase 2s, then we would, ask you, we will start issuing sequential Phase 2s. We have to put a lot of, unfortunately, rules around, who is eligible and such. So we have still some more work to do to determine who is eligible.
I would encourage everyone, if you do have a question, go ahead and email it to the contact information that you see on your screen here. And you can also give us a call at that phone number. If the folks in our operations office cannot answer that question, they'll refer you to one of us, and we will be happy to answer that.